Ocean Conservancy webinar, Local Solutions to the Global Challenge of Ocean Plastic Pollution. My name is Doug Kress, and I'm the Vice President of Conservation at Ocean Conservancy, where we have worked since 1972 to understand both the causes and the solutions to the enormous, challenging, and complex problem of marine debris. Through a series of presentations, videos, and a moderated panel session, we will examine today various aspects of the ocean's plastics crisis and highlight some innovative solutions. We will hear from key legislators, corporate leaders, and game-changing scientists who play important roles in framing this debate, both globally and locally. This event is being broadcast live on YouTube. It is being recorded and will be available on USAID's Urban Links website after the event. During the moderated panel discussion, we will have time for a few questions from the audience. Please type your question into the YouTube live comment stream. It would be helpful if you can identify if your question is to a specific speaker. We may not be able to answer all the questions today, but we will capture and review all questions and may answer some of them after the event. Ocean Conservancy's research has shown there is no single solution to solve the issue of marine pollution. Our plastics policy playbook, which was produced last year, was a first ever effort to understand the full range of policy options available and to put some robust analytics behind them to help policymakers make informed decisions on what might work best in their local contexts. In addition to highlighting the importance of local context, the playbook also emphasized the need for concerted collective action by researchers, governments, businesses, and civil society organizations. To achieve this, Ocean Conservancy builds visionary, ambitious, and innovative partnerships, willing to invest in change at a scale to achieve genuine transformation. That is why we are so happy to be here today with so many of our partners, including PepsiCo, Circular Capital, and FEMSA. Some of you may remember at the CHOW event last year, Ocean Conservancy hosted an event with Circular Capital and USAID, where USAID announced it would provide a $30 million partial credit guarantee to Circular Capital. Since then, the work hasn't stopped. Circular Capital has recently made its first investments, and Ocean Conservancy is partnering with the Circular Initiative, Circular Capital's affiliated nonprofit, and the Global Resilient Cities Network on the Urban Ocean Initiative. Urban Ocean has had a major milestone last week when we announced the first cohort of Urban Ocean cities: Can Tho in Vietnam, Malacca in Malaysia, Panama City in Panama, Pune in India, and Semarang in Indonesia. Urban Ocean will serve as the nucleus for the solid waste and circular economy efforts of an even bigger initiative, Cities for Resilient Recovery, or C2R, to help cities globally build back better in the wake of current pandemic. Our newly published report on the informal sector, which you can find on our website, will also help to shape that effort. Another of Ocean Conservancy's great partnerships is with USAID, not just in today's webinar, but through vital programs like the Clean Cities Blue Ocean Project, or CCBO, which you heard about briefly in the opening video and you'll hear about more later. So we really are among friends today. And with that, I'm delighted to introduce Michelle Beckering, the Assistant Administrator, Bureau for Economic Growth, Education, and the Environment at USAID.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug, for that introduction. And good afternoon to all of you who have come out to join us here today. It's really a privilege to be with you. I'm only sorry we couldn't be together in person as we had originally many months ago had hoped. But I'm delighted by the large turnout and the registration we've seen. And I think it just goes to show that what we're talking about today is a matter of such importance to so many stakeholders. And I hope you were able to, in some way or some fashion, on Monday to celebrate and acknowledge World Oceans Day. And I also hope you were able to capture and be involved in some of the Capitol Hill Oceans Week virtual sessions that were hosted yesterday. I'd like to start off today and thank the Ocean Conservancy for partnering with us at USAID to organize and host today's event. Ocean Conservancy has been a great partner to us, and you are such a global leader on this issue. And that leadership is more critical now than ever because truly of the scope of this problem we're all facing together. Secondly, I'd like to thank Senator Menendez and Representative McCall. Their participation in today's event, their longtime support for this issue, and importantly, their legislation on this topic that they are sponsoring truly represents the strong bipartisan interest in Congress on making progress on ocean plastics pollution. We all know that ocean plastics pollution is a massive challenge on a global scale. With an estimated 8 million tons of discarded plastic flowing into the ocean every year, the sheer size and complexity of this problem can be very difficult, frankly, for all of us to wrap our heads around. But tackling big, complex global challenges, breaking them down, and finding partners as well as manageable solutions is what we do best at USAID. And in the case of ocean plastic pollution, those solutions start at the local level, in the very cities and towns where most of these ocean plastic pollution originates. So that's where we typically focus our efforts. We work with local governments to improve waste management services so that less waste actually ends up in the water. We work with local schools and community groups to drive behavior change around recycling and proper waste disposal. And we work with local companies to promote new innovations and business models. And we also work with informal waste collectors who are often an essential part of the waste management system in the countries where we work. On that note, I do want to just take a moment to acknowledge the heroic work of these waste collectors everywhere during this global pandemic. We all know that waste collection is difficult and sometimes very dangerous in the best of times. But now in our current situation, it's never been more clear how essential waste collectors are. We've actually been able to gather a few personal stories from waste collectors from some of the organizations that we support. And I encourage you to check them out. Our staff are going to be posting them for you to look at in the chat box. In summary, at USAID, we are working on locally led solutions to help countries solve their own development challenges. We call this the journey to self-reliance, and it's our guiding approach as an agency. We really started this local systems approach with our municipal waste recycling program. And I'm really proud to say that program has provided 30 grants to local organizations across many key countries. We're also expanding this work globally through our new $48 million flagship Clean Cities Blue Ocean program. In both programs, I'm particularly proud of the focus for another key priority for USAID, which is women's economic empowerment. Our ocean plastic programs are making significant progress empowering women as entrepreneurs, as decision makers, and leaders in the traditionally male-dominated waste sector. We are thrilled that Clean Cities Blue Ocean is now finally launched and ramping up efforts in priority countries. You'll get to hear more from that head of that program on the panel later on. But of course, as I've noted before, we cannot solve this challenge alone. We need pioneering researchers like Professor Jenna at the University of Georgia to eliminate the sources of the problem and point the way towards solutions. We need impact investors like Circulate Capital to invest financial and technical resources in much needed waste management and recycling businesses and infrastructures. And we need champions in key industries like national beverage companies. And I'm thrilled that we'll get to hear from all of these perspectives in the panel that will follow this today. And perhaps most importantly, we need the expertise and resources of the private sector at a global scale. At USAID, we believe that private enterprise is the single most powerful force for lifting lives, for strengthening communities, and accelerating self-reliance. And that is why I am absolutely thrilled to announce today that USAID is entering a new private sector engagement partnership with the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. This is a CEO-driven alliance of more than 40 leading companies across the plastics value chain. Through the alliance, these companies have committed to invest $1.5 billion towards solutions in the fight to end plastic waste. This partnership will bring together global investment, technical expertise, and locally led solutions to drive innovation and sustainable change on a tremendous scale. We are excited to partner with the Alliance, and we look forward to hearing from one of their member companies, PepsiCo, a bit later on in the program. We are grateful for Pepsi's leadership on this issue and for their participation in today's event. In addition to being a member of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, PepsiCo was also notably the first investor in Circulate Capital. In closing, thank you again for your participation today on this important issue. I look forward to the following discussion. By coming together today and combining the best we all have to offer, we are meeting this global challenge head on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Governments play an important role in crafting legislation to combat the marine debris crisis, and we are very honored today to introduce a video message from Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. Senator Menendez serves as the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He is a champion on the ocean's plastic pollution issue and is one of the lead sponsors of the Save Our Seas 2.0 bill that would begin to address the international component of the ocean plastics pollution problem. The bill has been approved by the Senate and awaits consideration in the House. Here now, Senator Menendez.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the Ocean Conservancy and USAID for inviting me to speak to you all about efforts to address the growing global environmental threat of plastic waste in our oceans. I greatly appreciate the interest of everyone participating in today's policy forum and your work to find solutions to ultimately eliminate plastic waste in our oceans. I want to recognize my fellow ranking member, Mike McCall of Texas, and acknowledge his commitment to solving this problem, and Michelle Beckering, who heads the bureau charged with leading USAID's Clean Cities Blue Oceans program. The Earth's oceans are a global resource that sustains life everywhere. From the role oceans play in regulating the global climate, to supplying water through the hydrological cycle that rains on the land, and the bounty of fish and other proteins that feed billions of people worldwide. Conservation and stewardship of our oceans is critical to all nations and states, regardless of whether your country has a coastline or is landlocked, or if the state or district you are working for in the House or Senate is coastal, like New Jersey, or is an interior state. Our oceans are critical to global food security, and environmental sustainability worldwide. As ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I've traveled the world and see how plastic is choking communities and waterways in developing countries like India with poor waste management capacities. While plastic waste overtly threatens the health and safety of poor and vulnerable populations immediately proximate to this pollution, plastic also poses risks to the broader population as well, via locally caught contaminated seafood and contaminated public water supplies. This issue also hits home for me. New Jersey's economy is heavily dependent on our vibrant coastal communities. Our fishing, real estate, hospitality, tourism, and outdoor recreation industries depend upon clean and safe oceans. When plastic waste litters our beaches, threatens the safety of families visiting the shore, kills fish, birds, and other wildlife, and contaminates seafood, it harms New Jersey's economy and threatens public health and safety. I applaud USAID's effort along with its partners like the Ocean Conservancy and Circulate Capital to build capacities and raise public awareness to improve plastic waste management in developing countries. Scientists like University of Georgia's Dr. Jenna, who is on this afternoon's panel, and researchers at Rutgers University's Center for Urban Environmental Sustainability have produced excellent data on the volume, movement, and toxicity of ocean plastic, which informs where to best direct resources to address the problem. USAID's focus on urban areas is critically important, as well as spurring innovation, developing best practices, and improving social norms around the reduction, reuse, and recycling of plastic waste. The program's early success in East Asia speaks volumes of USAID and its partners' ability to tackle large problems. I'm encouraged by Administrator Barsa's interest to launch model programs in the Western Hemisphere. Because plastic waste, when managed properly, has value. When we help developing countries realize the value from discarded plastic, we improve environmental and economic development outcomes that benefit the host country and the world over, since stewardship of our oceans is a responsibility all nations share. Last year, Senators Whitehouse of Rhode Island, Sullivan of Alaska, and I introduced the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act. Building on the success of the first Save Our Seas Act, which established markers on congressional support for addressing marine debris, my colleagues and I developed a three-part bill to enhance domestic marine debris response and innovation, improve domestic plastic waste management, and bolster U.S. leadership and global engagement and cooperation to combat plastic waste and marine debris. As the ranking Democrat of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I take special pride in the international title of this bipartisan legislation, which formalizes U.S. foreign policy on the means to addressing plastic waste and marine debris, bolsters support for USAID's plastic waste management programs, and encourages the United States to explore the development of an international agreement to foster cooperation on addressing plastic waste globally. I'm pleased that one of the first orders of business for the Senate in 2020 was passing SOS 2.0 by unanimous consent. The bill is in the House, where it receives 6 committee referrals, transportation and infrastructure being the primary ones. The coronavirus has understandably slowed SOS 2.0's momentum coming into the new year, but I'm still encouraged that the House will act on our bill. And the House companion bill is sponsored by outstanding leaders in Representatives Don Young of Alaska and Suzanne Bonamici of Oregon. COVID-19 has brought into focus how a global security threat can alter the way the world operates. While this pandemic came swiftly and arguably caught the world by surprise, there are other well-known threats that we must focus on preparing and preventing to avoid the gravest of consequences. climate change is a clear and increasingly present security threat we must prepare for. But I'd argue that the abundance of plastic waste in our oceans is also an emerging threat that requires comprehensive action. The science shows that plastic pollution could result in the collapse of marine ecosystems that support life on Earth. Fortunately, there is bipartisan support for action on plastic pollution. It is my hope that our ambition to tackle this global problem will grow. I again appreciate USAID's work on the issue through the Clean Cities, Blue Oceans program, and I thank you all for participating in today's discussion and look forward to working with you on this problem going forward. Good luck and be safe.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. I would now like to welcome a second video message from Representative Michael McCall of Texas. Representative McCall serves as the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he has been a leader on many international conservation issues. Representative McCall has also introduced bipartisan legislation, the Plastics Act, which would tackle aspects of the ocean plastics pollution issue. Representative McCall.
Thank you for the invitation to participate in this event. I especially want to thank USAID, the Ocean Conservancy, and all the panelists. I wish we could be together in person to discuss these important issues. A shocking stat that I'm sure all of you know: 8 million metric tons of plastic are dumped into our oceans each and every year. This does serious damage to our ecosystem and threatens the health and safety not only of our oceans, but also our communities, especially those whose economies rely upon ocean waters. And it's completely unsustainable. While China is responsible for the largest share of this waste, other developing nations contribute as well. That's why the United States must do more to help these developing countries manage their plastic waste to prevent it from ending up into our oceans. And that's why also Chairman Engel and I introduced H.R. 4636, the Plastics Act. This legislation will prioritize efforts to help developing countries both limit their plastic waste and improve the ways they dispose of it. And I could be more pleased to see USAID's new Clean Cities, Blue Ocean initiative already starting to do exactly what Chairman Engel and I envisioned with the Plastic Act. Clean Cities, Blue Ocean will help local communities develop better ways to manage their waste, while at the same time providing economic opportunity for women and other vulnerable populations. Now that's what I call a win-win. And at the same time, USAID, in partnership with Curated Capital, has been working with the private sector to increase U.S. business engagement on this issue. This includes creative partnerships like Trash Free Seas Alliance. I am proud to see what USAID has secured over $100 million in private sector commitments already. Congratulations. This proves the power of public-private partnerships and shows that we can do anything if we can work together. Keeping oceans clean is truly a bipartisan issue. It's an investment in future generations and the health of our oceans and communities. I want to once again thank USAID for all the work they have done and to congratulate them for launching the Clean Cities Blue Ocean Initiative. And I know Chairman Engel and I look forward to working with all of you to pass the Plastics Act to address plastic pollution in our oceans. Thank you, and may God bless America.
Thank you, Congressman McCall. As I mentioned earlier, Ocean Conservancy is pleased to be among so many partners and friends and partner organizations, and one of those is PepsiCo Incorporated. Simon Loudon is the Chief Sustainability Officer for PepsiCo Incorporated, and he offers the following video message.
Hello, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to join today's very important and timely conversation. If there's one thing I've learned over the last few months, it's the importance of partnership. And this is the kind of broad partnership we need to deliver true systemic change. change that will keep plastic within the circular economy and out of our communities and oceans. And whilst the issue of plastic waste is a global challenge, bigger than any one organisation, corporation or community can tackle alone, there is potential for enormous impact when stakeholders come together to work towards a common solution. And that is why over the last 2 years, PepsiCo and the PepsiCo Foundation have committed more than $65 million around the world in partnerships to advance recycling and waste collection. And today, as our communities deal with the extraordinary impact of COVID-19, it is more important than ever for cities and towns to come together to solve long-term sustainability challenges. And one way we can do that is by investing in recycling, infrastructure and education. Only by working as a team, public and private, consumers and communities, companies, governments and NGOs, can we drive meaningful progress towards cleaner oceans and a more sustainable future for us all.
Thank you very much for that message, Simon. Ocean Conservancy is honored to not only co-host this webinar today with USAID, but to partner with USAID on important programs that confront the plastics ocean crisis head-on. It is my pleasure now to introduce Claire Romanek, the Senior Urban Specialist and Oceans Plastics Specialist at USAID.
Thank you, Doug. A few minutes ago, Michelle said that taking big, complex, global challenges, breaking them down, and finding manageable solutions is what we do best at USAID. I couldn't agree more with that statement. I'd like to take the next few minutes to lay out how we are working to break down the complex global challenge posed by ocean plastic pollution and develop customized solutions to improve local waste systems. Cities in developing countries and emerging economies are growing rapidly, and with this urbanization comes an ever-increasing volume of waste, particularly plastic packaging. When this waste is mismanaged, plastic gets into waterways and eventually our ocean. Under USAID's Clean Cities Blue Ocean program, we are working in cities across Asia, South America, and the Caribbean, focused on 3 priorities: to build the capacity of cities to manage their growing volume of waste, to partner with the private sector for the 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle, and to create end markets, and to promote innovation and investment in business models, technologies, and infrastructure fit to the local context. Looking at the whole system is central to USAID's approach. Waste management is inextricably tied to other local issues: municipal governance, tax collection, and infrastructure, for example, all must be addressed at the same time. Cutting across all 3 priorities is the need to ensure that everything we do makes the lives of the local people better. Any solution we implement needs to consider the informal workers who are so critical to waste collection and sorting in developing countries. This work is informed by the lessons we have learned from our municipal waste recycling program, which provided a wonderful laboratory for testing different types of partnerships and solutions in key countries. Through this program, we have provided grants to 30 different local organizations working at the grassroots and city levels in Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam since 2017. We've spent a lot of time over the past 3 years analyzing the results and experiences from these different activities, and we've distilled those lessons into the 3 priorities that guide our current work. First, building capacity. In many countries, there are good national laws and even local regulations for solid waste management, but the local governments have limited financial resources and capacity to plan for and operate effective waste management systems. So we need to spend more time training local governments in solid waste planning and more efficient methods of operations. We've had some success doing this in relatively low-cost ways. In Indonesia, for example, one of our grantees provided geospatial data to the city government, crowdsourced by youth volunteers through a mobile app that helped the city map transfer points and illegal dumping sites. Through the Municipal Waste Recycling Program, we've also learned the value of involving and building the capacity of diverse stakeholders, like independent waste collectors. In Ho Chi Minh City, these workers talked about the social stigmas they face, even as they labor in the wee hours to help cities maintain public health and a clean environment. By helping the workers organize in cooperatives, they can receive training to keep them healthy and safe. And we've seen that providing them something as simple as a uniform helps elevate their status and gives them respect. Through Clean Cities Blue Ocean, we will continue to enable all these local actors to improve how waste is managed in their communities. Second, building partnerships with the private sector for the 3 Rs and creating new markets. We've also learned that the knowledge, networks, and resources of the private sector are essential to any lasting solution. As Michelle said, we are excited to be partnering with the Alliance to End Plastic Waste and working with major companies like PepsiCo. But we also need to work with the private sector at the local level. For example, to advance the 3 Rs with local restaurants, grocery stores, and hotels. In the Philippines, one of our grantees has teamed up with shopping malls to educate tenants and customers about plastic waste mismanagement and good waste management practices. But if we are really going to tackle ocean plastic pollution, we need massive amounts of investment in waste management and recycling infrastructure. One of the most important things we can do as a development organization is incentivize the private sector to invest more in this space. So a year ago, we launched our partnership with Circulate Capital to catalyze greater investment in the waste sector, something similar to what USAID did 2 decades ago in the Philippines to increase investment in the municipal drinking water sector by providing partial loan guarantees. April Crow will share more in the panel about the vision of Circulate Capital to expand the investment pool in the waste management and recycling sector by showing that there are bankable investments in Asian cities. Through Clean Cities Blue Ocean, we are continuing to build private sector partnerships at global, national, and local levels to encourage new investment in waste management infrastructure, to encourage more sustainable production and consumption habits, and to create new markets for recycled and reusable products. Third, promoting innovation and investment. The evidence we've collected through the Municipal Waste Recycling Program showed us the value of adjusting how we promote innovation and investment to account for local culture, needs, and capacities. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. One of our grantees in the Philippines has trained entrepreneurs to open nothing wasted convenience stores with easy-to-use dispensing systems and reusable containers, cutting down on the 163 million single-serving plastic sachet packets typically sold in the Philippines each day. By using a common Filipino phrase, wala usik, which means nothing wasted, this innovative model resonates locally. We believe that small investments in innovative approaches like these can be replicated to have a great impact. Working in the poorest neighborhoods, we recognize that people have needs that make it an imperative to create an economic incentive to separate waste and recycle. In Indonesia, local waste banks pay low-income families for their recyclables, but these waste banks have struggled with the economic viability of collecting lower value plastic, like shopping bags. Our grantees are connecting neighborhood waste banks to a centralized processing facility to improve financial sustainability. Now, a network of over 50 waste banks in Semarang is able economically to recycle low-value plastics, like noodle wrappers. Also in Sorong City in West Papua, a network of over 90 waste banks is now collecting over 15 metric tons of plastic waste per month with the support of a municipal recycling fee. Clean Cities Blue Ocean will identify, test, and scale these and other grassroots innovations that solve the specific problems of the local systems where we work. Another key lesson is the importance of behavior change, which, like everything else, has to be locally appropriate. By partnering with influential local organizations like schools, women's organizations, and youth groups, we've had a lot of success driving change around household waste disposal and recycling practice. Seeking to understand what incentives are needed in each community to create long-term behavior change is integral to the approach under Clean Cities Blue Ocean. Finally, I just want to say that this event comes at a pivotal time for progress on plastic pollution. This is a very dynamic sector. The dust hasn't settled yet on what are the most effective methods to reduce flows of plastic into the ocean from cities in developing nations. We are still learning and have just published a case study on our efforts in 2 Vietnamese cities to create behavior change and mitigate ocean plastic pollution. I am very excited about this panel that's coming up and very happy to be part of this event.
Thank you very much for that address, Claire. And on behalf of Ocean Conservancy, congratulations to USAID on launching Clean Cities Blue Ocean and this ambitious work plan that you've laid out. We will now turn to a panel of experts to help examine the issues of marine plastic debris more deeply and to highlight some of the challenges and possible solutions to this crisis. As mentioned earlier, this event is being broadcast live on YouTube. If you wish to address any of the panelists, please type your questions into the YouTube live comment stream and include your name and relevant contact information. We will get to as many of the audience questions as we can. I'm now joined by Dr. Jenna Jambak, professor in the College of Engineering at the University of Georgia, John Angen, a senior solid waste specialist and chief of party for Clean Cities Blue Ocean, April Crow, the head of investor relations and external affairs at Circulate Capital, Johan Gonzalez, the director of legal and corporate affairs for Ambev in the Dominican Republic, and Lorena Guille Lares, the director of FEMSA Foundation in Mexico. Welcome to all the panelists, and thank you so much for being with us virtually today. Jenna, I'd like to start with you if I could. Your groundbreaking research defined the parameters by which waste management and the plastics crisis are now defined. How important is that data to the policies needed to address the crisis, and how does that policy translate to local action?
Thanks, Doug. I think data is critical, to help us define a starting point of where the situation is at and to inform policy development and change moving forward. And I think some examples that emerged after we published our work in 2015 is that Indonesia passed a marine litter action plan, and all kinds of resources, came there, and they're moving forward with that. I think closer to home, we saw the Save Our Seas 1.0 Act passed. And of course, you heard, the fact that 2.0 is in there as well. And I've had the privilege of being able to testify 3 times to Congress to provide data, for that legislation. And then I think, we've heard about the municipal waste recycling program, that was really targeted in the areas that, through our data analysis were found to have the greatest need. And I think for me, moving forward, I've to this holistic systems data collection, working collaborative with communities as well on a circularity assessment protocol. And this is specifically collecting data for local interventions and policy.
Great, thanks. As a follow-up question, some of your next work will occur with us at Ocean Conservancy in Mexico, but also will occur in the Philippines and Vietnam. How prepared are those countries to play a meaningful role in addressing the waste management issues they face?
Yeah, I think, what we've seen through the initial municipal waste recycling program is it realized a lot of activity in those countries. I'm excited that we have a grant with the Philippines, working directly with NGOs and universities there. Also in Vietnam, and they're on their way with the Marine Litter Action Plan. Vietnam has created an action plan. When I first went there in 2017, it was just kind of starting. And then even just going back in 2018, hosting the Jeff meeting, all of the grantees in the program. And then I had a National Geographic grant that actually turned into a Fulbright for a student of mine working directly with the university there, who's now applied for like a USAID peer grant. So just things can forward in these collaborations, connecting all these people as USAID does, and then working forward with Ocean Conservancy and others in North Vietnam. And then now the Mexico collaboration is going to be specifically, again, with to expand the community-based work we're doing to be able to scale that in a better way. So all of this has been great and exciting to go forward.
Great, thanks. So the takeaway is you're busy. Do I have that right?
Yeah, we're pretty busy.
Great, thanks. I'll turn to you now, John. So those same issues of infrastructure and capacity would seem to be relevant to your work at CCBO. CCBO seeks to build capacity in developing countries for improved waste management practices with the goal of delivering practical but impactful solutions. Can you share some examples of the types of activities you'll be working on going forward?
Sure. Well, first of all, I can't say enough about the creativity and passion of the Clean Cities Blue Ocean team, the support we've received so far from USAID, and the willingness of so many organizations to collaborate with us as we move forward. And I think that passion and that collaboration is going to be key to us being able to make a difference going forward. CCBO's focus is on developing land-based solid waste management and 3R solutions to address specific needs tailored to some very unique contexts. Because when it comes to waste, the conditions can vary widely depending on where you're working. So some of the things we'll be working on include looking to improve collection, aggregation, and segregation capability through innovation, really to drive more vibrant recycling markets. Social behavior change, which is aimed really at first understanding why certain behaviors exist before we go about setting strategies to change them. Working collaboratively at the local level to develop long-term solid waste management and recycling strategies and policy. Governance is a key component of what we'll be doing. Building capacity, improving working conditions, and enabling women-led organizations who make up such a huge percentage of the waste industry in developing countries. And finally, working with our private sector partners to put them in a position to invest in bankable projects that will bring about long-term systemic change, particularly in the area of waste infrastructure.
Sure, thank you. You talked about the informal sector and the role they play. They're obviously a vital part of the waste and recycling chain. How will CCBO work with this critical portion of the sector?
Well, CCBO operates through a local systems approach where we try to bridge local needs with expertise and resources from our own network, including a lot of our private sector partners. In many developing economies, solid waste and recycling systems really lack the infrastructure necessary to be able to aggregate enough material to build the economy of scale that's necessary to be economically sustainable over the long term, which is in part a big reason why it's very difficult for a lot of these projects to attract capital from the private sector. So by building right-sized solid waste and recycling infrastructure, along with local education, planning, and policy, we can begin to generate the kind of economics for facilities to remain sustainable for the long term and begin to meet some of the basic investment criteria. Through our local grants program, which we're very excited about, we're already looking at some interesting opportunities to collaborate with our private sector partners on the development of aggregation and sorting facilities, the expansion of collection services, as well as technologies and equipment that will not only potentially enhance the value of recyclables, but seek opportunities to create some new markets for reuse.
Great, thank you so much.
Those are just a few of the examples.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those examples, John. Clearly, funding waste management at this level requires not just funding, but incentivized funding. So I'll now turn to you, April. This seems to be where we're headed with this conversation. How important was it to create a funding mechanism to facilitate solutions to the ocean plastics crisis? And what makes Circulate Capital unique compared with other funds?
Well, thank you, Doug. First of all, Ocean Conservancy and USAID for the opportunity to join this an important dialogue. Our work at Circulate Capital is really a result of the science and research we have heard about and learned about from Jenna, the leadership of Ocean Conservancy in this space. And that research, as I'm sure most of you already know, showed that a potential 45% reduction of the global plastic leakage in the ocean is possible by investing in waste and recycling infrastructure in a few key countries in Asia. And as you said, we need to talk about this from a financial perspective. The $1 million question, or as I usually refer to it, the multi-billion-dollar question in this case, is how do we attract the resources that we need to tackle this challenge? And that's what our focus is at Circulate Capital. Our investment strategy focuses on identifying the investments throughout the recycling value chain that can be scaled and replicated. We want to be able to design and invest in programs that catalyze the additional investment by showing that the investment in the waste and recycling sector and circular economy truly can provide financial returns. In terms of what makes us unique, part of that is our funders. We are funded by some of the world's leading companies, including PepsiCo. We heard from Simon earlier in the session, but also Dow, P&G, Unilever, Chanel, Danone, Coca-Cola, and CP Chem. And they're not only providing funding, but they're lending their technical expertise, their global supply chain and business knowledge to support the success of our investments. Really, over the past 2 years, we have spent a lot of time in the region. We've built our investment team in the region, and we've evaluated hundreds of potential investments. And as we look at these, we believe that we really are looking for those that can have the greatest potential impact for helping with the marine debris and ocean plastics issue, while also building sustainable businesses, things that can help demonstrate, again, that financial viability of putting money into this sector. We're looking for opportunities throughout the value chain, as well as with new materials and innovations that help drive a more circular economy. And in the short term, we have really prioritized our investments to support the recycling value chain.
Fantastic, April. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of your recently announced investments at Circulate Capital?
Yeah, happy to do that. At the end of April, we announced our first 2 investments in 2 companies. And this funding that we are providing first will help them weather the impact of the COVID-19 crisis, and then help them grow and scale their businesses. And these first investments are companies that are leading their industries locally, both in India and in Indonesia. They're building markets to collect and recycle local plastic waste into raw materials. And they're looking to ensure that what they're collecting truly becomes tradable commodities, and really building this as strong businesses. The first company that I'll mention is Lucro. They're based in Mumbai, and it's an Indian manufacturer that's really been focused on a big challenge. We've heard about this in some of the from some of the speakers today around the difficult to manage flexible plastic. And this company, Lucro, has developed an integrated process to collect and sort and recycle this type of plastic. So a lot of potential we see with this company. And then the second company is Treaty Oasis. They're a female-owned Indonesian company that specializes in recycling PET bottles into recycled PET flakes that then can be used for manufacturing both plastic packaging and textiles. I'll also note that with Treaty Oasis, the loan that we made to them is 50% guaranteed by the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation in collaboration with USAID. As you heard Claire mention our partnership earlier. This is really a unique partnership because it helps us incentivize investment in this recycling value chain through de-risking these investments. And truly, it's a great example of blended finance in action. We're super excited about these first investments and those that we have in the pipeline right now. It's going to take a lot of companies like these and many more to really strengthen this waste management and recycling infrastructure in the region of South and Southeast Asia, which will ultimately help us with this issue globally.
Great. Thank you so much, April. Johan, I'd like to turn to you now and ask about the situation in the Dominican Republic where you're based. What is the current situation regarding solid waste in the Dominican Republic, and how has Cervecería Nacional Dominicana addressed it?
Thanks, Doug. Solid waste management in DR is a real challenge in the country, as it is in the most part of the world. Many of you may have seen the viral video of the plastic wave in Santo Domingo. That was a direct result of the 500 million pounds of waste that the country generates yearly, and only less than 80% of this being recycled. The current situation of solid waste in the DR is worrying, considering that we are an island, and according to the World Bank, we are the 4th country of Latin America to generate the most waste. So, confident in our belief that sustainability is our business, in July 2019, Cervecería Nacional Dominicana, AB InBev operation in the DR, launched the program Recicla 100 Más, where we committed to recycling 12 million pounds of PET bottles yearly, and the same amount of PET that the company emits to the market every year. Since the launch of the project, we recover and recycle over 2 million pounds of PET, equivalent to more than 60 million plastic bottles. I'm sorry, Doug, you're in mute.
Sorry. That was going to happen sometime during this webinar, sometime. I'm going to try that again. Thank you so much. Considering that the Dominican Republic is recycling less than 10% of its current plastic waste, how does Recicla 100 Más work, and how will you reach your goal ultimately?
Okay, Doug, C&D effort in circular packaging dates back much early. We have success story for more than 30 years, which is the beer glasses bottle collection system. This collection network has over 500 collection points all through all the country. And we have an 82% of our beer bottle returned to our production process to be used from 7 to 12 times. So last year, we asked ourselves, why not use this network to facilitate the recovery and recycle of plastic? We start working and focus on 3 pillars. The first one, valorization of plastic, development of collection center, and development of collection recycle. The first thing we did was to close an agreement with the preformed supplier, where they have the obligation to buy the same amount of plastic that they sell us to manufacture our PET preform. The second one, we train, equip, and develop our glass collection points for the collection of plastic. We install compactors to reduce the cost of transportation, deliver safety equipment, and training. And the last one, we are also developing partnership with local recyclers who are in charge to purchasing the material from the collection point, transporting them to centralized and large collection point so it can later be repackaged and exported to the preferred supplier, so that he can inject the recycled content into our new PET bottles.
Great. Thank you so much for that explanation, Johan. Lorena, you were only appointed as the director of the FEMSA Foundation in late April, so congratulations and welcome to the plastics community. Very nice to have you here. Every stakeholder seems to have a plan for how to incentivize the private social sector regarding the plastics debris crisis. What is FEMSA Foundation's added value to this equation? Also, you're muted now, Lorena.
Sorry for this.
Good.
So thank you, though, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to join this panel today. At Fundación FEMSA, we know that we have still a long way to go and that more research is needed in key areas. However, we realized that we could contribute to a system of waste management if we focus in three particular actions. First, deep understanding of the problem, engaging in pilot projects and proof of concept, and third, communicating the problem to inspire a shared responsibility. So talking about the understanding of the problem, we know that if we understand what is happening, why is it happening in Mexico and Latin America, we will be able to act accordingly and above all to have efficiency in addressing the root cause to actually move the needle in terms of impact. So now we know that this is a system problem and we decided to use our corporate and foundations convening power to open spaces of dialogue among sectors and funding research and documentation around best practices and policies in Latin America, bringing a diversity of experts on board, just like the work we are doing with Ocean Conservancy around circular economies, and also with World Resources Institute, among other partners. Secondly, about engaging in pilot projects, we have committed to demonstrate that there is a solution out there and that is viable. So the last 2 years, we've been exploring feasible ways to stop the flow of debris to environment. And particularly in our region, you know, the informal sector is key for addressing the collection issue in the short term. So we're about to launch a project with IWRC in Mexico and Brazil to ensure that the management system approach and the priority outcomes include the waste pickers, improve health, safety, and financial well-being. Putting a people's perspective in this approach. And also, as a third point, we believe that understanding the problem needs to be communicated to the different sectors with a focus on policymakers and legislators, also CEOs of leading corporations across industries and media. We need each of them to be engaged with the construction of the solution, becoming champions, and altogether build new narratives that enable behavioral change. We believe that it is imperative that we as society learn new ways to relate with resources and materials, that we acknowledge that we are all consumers, but at the same time that we are citizens, and that we are all interconnected and sharing the same planet. And in narratives, we need to move away from the waste disposal to waste management and from waste to resources. To understand that circular economy is not only a hedge against resource scarcity, but also an engine of innovation and growth, and especially also to take into consideration the cultural map of Latins.
Thank you so much, Lorena. The excellent work that's been done by the FEMSA Foundation in Mexico is one you seek to scale up to the rest of Latin America or to other parts. You've mentioned Brazil earlier. How difficult will that be? What are the challenges you think you might find, and how is FEMSA Foundation equipped to address those challenges?
Well, thank you, Doug. I think it is certainly a challenge, but we also know that we have enough drive and capacities to take it to another countries. FEMSA has a presence in 13 Latin American countries, and we have worked for many years through our foundation in using the power of collective action. And we have built strong social capital that we believe will be key to extend our scope and impact. We have a great experience that I would like to share briefly with ECOSE. This is a nonprofit association that we co-founded and that operates a national collective program to promote the proper handling of packaging waste in Mexico. The work that has resulted has been impressive. It now integrates 29 industries, over 150 companies, and over 400 brands, and collects almost 60% of all the PET waste in our country. So what is important with this is that we are not planning only to replicate the Casa model, but we want to take these experiences and other experiences that we have had in the last 2 years to the next phase in Latin America, integrating our learnings and discoveries, and integrate this in our model. And our model is composed by 6 elements, and I will just mention them very fast. One is the policy and communication. We believe that engaging with stakeholders from different sectors, where government, the society, and the industry are keys, is really important to align our vision and to address this common goal. Also, the second is incentives and behaviors. Because as we are part of the same value chain, we have some responsibilities and actions to do, and it's important to understand this with the social, political, and industrial behaviors around waste management. Also, science and data is the third. We are now working with satellite data, exploring micro and macro analysis to understand the waste behaviors, and also to find the leakages and the volume and composition of waste. The fourth is the monitoring of R&D, because we want inside our corporation also to work in the design of our products to be 100% recyclable. The fifth is the financial mechanisms to develop a sustainable plan, and the fifth and the sixth and the last is on the ground projects, just like the ones that I already mentioned. So I think that going following this, we will be going in the right direction.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. As I said at the beginning of this webinar, we'd be taking questions from the audience. So if you are watching on YouTube and the live stream, you have questions, please put them into the chat box, and they'll be curated in here so that we can address them to the panelists as we're waiting for those to be moved forward. I just had a question. We have 2 countries represented here that are in-country projects. We have experts who've worked all over the world, and I'm just curious, Jenna, in your experience with the data you're collecting, are you finding tremendous variances in the sorts of trash and plastics streams, or is it regional? Is it national? Is it continental? I'm curious what sort of variances are popping up.
That's a good question. So I think, well, one thing I would say is that, countries are all in different economic development stages, and you'll find in general that waste generation rates are coupled with economic. So you can imagine various different stages. I think one consistency amongst that variability is that what we see ending up sort of in the environment are low value materials. And that, may change where there isn't formal sector, but definitely where there is a sector of folks who are relying on these materials for their livelihoods, then the valuable materials do get picked up and recycled. And that could be more often than in a place like the US. So I think that's one component. And in terms of our percent plastic in the waste stream, that doesn't vary too much between like 9 and 13%. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, thank you so much for that. Some questions rolling in here, which I'll hand out to different panel members. John, this one appears directed at you. High praise for the CCBO program. What's the geographic scope of CCBO? What regions and countries would you work in? And can you talk a bit more about the grants program? What are the kinds of activities that USAID would be interested in funding?
Sure, Doug. The geographic scope is certainly focused on Asia, which has many of the larger plastic pollution producers, if you will. The Philippines, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Indonesia, and India in Asia. And then we're also focused on the Dominican Republic and Peru. So that's our geographic scope at this point. The grant opportunities, we actually have grant programs currently running in the Dominican Republic, Philippines, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka and the Maldives. And we've received some fantastic proposals already that we're in the process of evaluating. The kinds of activities, this is where it gets really interesting. The quality of the applications or the concept papers that we've received so far has been very impressive. We're looking at everything from foundational research related to social behavior change, to governance, to building, working on building solid waste management plans, to opportunities to potentially work in collaboration with some of our private sector partners on infrastructure development. And I think, as April talked about earlier, building replicable models is something that we're really interested in. So pilot projects and proof of concept when it comes to replicable models is something that's really interesting to us as well. And we received some interesting proposals in that vein.
Right, thank you so much. Here's a question for Johan. Is the PET recycled on site in the Dominican Republic?
No, as I mentioned, the plastic we collect through our program are sent to our preferred supplier, where they are processed and turned into a recycled PET bottle for the operation. Like I said, I think we are developing the local recycling industry in DR.
Okay, fantastic. I had a question, a follow-up for April. There's no question that the link that Circular Capital provides was essential to incentivize the waste management programs around the world. What is the scale we're talking about that we have to hit? What are we at right now, and what is the timeline we're on?
Yeah, no, that's, as I mentioned, we are starting at Circulate Capital. We've raised a little over $100 million, and that's a drop in the bucket to what the billions of dollars that are required. What we're trying to do is demonstrate with these investments in the short term, again, that it is an investable space. And one of our key metrics is with co-investment. So being able to unlock dollars from others through the partnerships that we're already forming to start to build that on-ramp for these institutional investors. I know Ocean Conservancy and some of the research had some initial estimates on the funding that would be required. Again, you know, it is billions, and so with that, we have to be able to show that this can be, you know, a space where those that have that type of funding can come in and participate to build this infrastructure.
Fantastic, thank you. It's a big ask then. In terms of the work FEMSA Foundation is doing in Mexico, Lorena, I'm curious, what is your first impression? You've only been in there for about 6 or 7 weeks now, and what did you expect when you entered FEMSA Foundation, and what have you found to be most inspiring? You're muted again, sorry.
Thank you. I think that one of the things that I am excited the most is how this shared responsibility, integrating all sectors of society, have joined efforts and have shared this responsibility in the way they are addressing the collecting of waste. I truly believe that if we continue in this same direction and we are able to continue monitoring data and having evidence around the impact that we are having, but at the same time, we are able to inspire a common goal in the society to start working together in the context that we are having socially, politically, and economically threatened in our country and many countries in Latin America, we will be able to take this to the next step. I think that the work society has been doing, depositing correctly and separating solid waste in specific materials such as PET, and how the government has been implementing state programs and monitoring and encouraging compliance with regulations has been also key. And how, you know, in the commercial side, how we are moving forward, and not in the right speed yet, but we are working on how do we recover material and work on the post-commerce waste management. And the industry has also an important role here. We need to speed up in the way that we are raising awareness to the consumers, in the way we are understanding us as consumers, but also as citizens? How do we bring educational communication to the society, but coming from the industry, putting resources to that, and also to support the government and in recycling and innovating and designing products? So I think we should be continue reinforcing that and collaborating more strongly with partners.
Thank you, Lorena. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring at some point into this webinar the issues we're all facing globally right now with COVID-19 and lockdowns. A number of the countries that you work in are facing very real limitations on the ability to get out, and the informal sector is very badly impaired by that. I'm just curious if anybody would speak to what they believe may have been lost in the months in terms of activity and progress during the lockdown. Some of the countries currently reopening quickly, like Vietnam, may be the most pivotal. If there's any of the panelists would like to address some of those issues, it'd be appreciated.
Doug, that's something that I can address. Certainly, we have been dealing with a very unique situation when it comes to the coronavirus, and it has certainly impacted us in terms of our ability to actually be on the ground in a lot of the countries that we're working in, which takes away, obviously, from our ability to make changes fast. However, I think if there's one thing that's come out of this, I think it's also raised the level of awareness of the importance of the labor force, particularly which is significantly women-led in most developing countries, and the working conditions, which is something that we were already aware of that we wanted to try and work on. And I think it's really raised the level of awareness that's something that needs to be addressed immediately. So it's not so much about COVID as it is just improving the working conditions, whether it be with personal protective equipment, training when it comes to the recognition of hazardous or infectious waste. There's a lot of work to be done, and that's an area that we're going to be focusing on pretty strongly. So certainly, even during these times, we've been able to to do a lot of work remotely. We've been pretty productive and gotten an awful lot done. And we hope that when it's safe for our grantees and our local resources on the ground to get out and start doing some of the work that we hope to be able to do, that we'll be able to have an impact as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you, John. As a follow-up question for you, as a solid waste specialist working in this sector, what are the positive signs that you're seeing that make you think this is a time for improvement?
I think the level of awareness is very high. There's no question, and I think it's it's really all about education. This is an area or a space that has gotten a lot of attention over the last few years, but particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, it's really been something that a lot more people are aware of. I hear it all the time from people that I've worked with. I've been 30 plus years in the waste industry, and suddenly I'm the most popular person at parties now because everybody wants to talk about green plastics and a variety of other things. And I think it's time, and we have the support out there. We certainly the support that we have from USAID in recognizing the issue, but also the same is true for our private sector partners who are really coming to the table and saying we want to be involved, we want to be part of the solution, and we can certainly use their help. And I think there's been a tremendous outreach, and I think really every day we hear from multiple people, how can I help? What can I do? And that's very heartening. So that makes us even more passionate about what we're doing.
Well, fantastic. I'd like to turn to you for a second, if I could, Johan. In Dominican Republic, what is it that gives you hope right now that you're on the right path and that the plastics pollution crisis can be addressed effectively?
For sure, the bottles collector are closed now because for the pandemic, And that's why we decide to working with this current collection point, provide them necessary equipment and training to develop it. But it's a very challenge now after the pandemic to invest in this collection center.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Jenna, there's a question here for you on the chat line. Are any of the programs discussed utilizing ML, UAVs, et cetera, technology for monitoring the debris?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, some of the cutting edge, I think, in this work for monitoring and for research. I do know that one of the MWRP projects in Indonesia, one of the ones that Claire talked about, Gringo is also working on artificial intelligence and machine learning for some of their mobile app technology. I believe they're also working with Google, which is really cool. And some of our work, yes, I think, so drones used for trying to be able to cover more areas. We've gone from just pen and paper and looking at litter to using mobile technology for reporting. But being able to cover a lot of areas important. So even on our most recent expedition to the Ganges with National Geographic, we had drone footage, and they can identify plastic that way. New papers have come out identifying it in the ocean using drone technology as well. And that's, I think you're going to continue to see expanded work in this space, and that's going to make monitoring the projects that are conducted by all of the other panelists, by Circulate, by CCBO, easier as we develop and refine the strategies.
Great, thank you so much. There's a question now here for you again, Johan. You said that you were building on the success of 30 years of collection of glass bottles. Was the collection of glass bottles supported through a deposit scheme? Is this something you think would work with plastics? And if yes, where and how would customers redeem money for their bottles in the Dominican Republic?
This collection center for the last 30 years, we decide to create it because the people think that the beer bottle is like a one way. When they threw the waste, the bottle, but that's why we decide to create the 500 collection center. And we decide to valorize the beer bottle. And that's why we ask ourselves, why do not use the same platform to recollect the plastic? And that's the result. We collect now 2 million pounds of PET now.
Wow, fantastic. We have just about 10 minutes left of this presentation, this webinar now. And I'd like to go back through the panel one last time with a general question, have each of you answered if I could. What do the panelists suggest to help reduce and clean up the waste of low-value plastic, especially considering how these plastics are most used in small single-use products that the poor really depend on in many of the countries? Any thoughts or suggestions to that issue? I'll start with you, Jenna.
Thanks, Doug. So I think what would be great is to avoid that waste in the first place. I'm really excited about some of the programs, like a company called Gramo, which started in Chile and is expanding to others. And we heard about in the program in the Philippines, right? Sort of avoiding that whole sachet, avoiding what was at 163 million every day. So environmentally speaking, the best thing we can do is to avoid that waste. But one, I think, program that I saw within India also on the ground is thinking about source segregation. So folks who are moving towards that, then they could segregate that waste. And in the zero waste community that I was able to visit there, they were actually using that then. When it piles up, it's actually not a large amount over time. So it'd be many, many months that they could then store that material, and then it was using as fuel in cement kiln facilities. So not a great, not necessarily the best use, but at least not on the ground. And so people really trying to figure out what to do with that material. So not generating it in the first place, but of course people need to get, meet their needs with getting products.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. I'm just going to go across the screen the way I see it, which is not the way you may see it. So next on line is you, John. You're muted, John.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I concur with what Jenna brought up. I think there are a lot of innovative ways to to face this. I think that it really comes down to education in the first place, and I think there are some interesting reuse opportunities that we're taking a look at. Technologies that can lead to things like building materials and that sort of thing. But it really gets back to increasing the level of awareness. What we find, just strictly from a waste standpoint, is that there are so many, we won't call them landfills because they're not, they're actually open dumps in most of the countries that we're working in. And this single-use plastic is the material that blows away. And it blows away, it eventually finds its way into waterways. It's a big part of the problem that we have. So trying to address it with things like whether it's extended producer responsibility or whether it's alternative uses for that material, but it all gets back to really educating at the local level, because I don't think the single-use plastics are going to go away. It's really all about how we manage them. That's really the key ingredient, and that gets back to education, social behavior change, a lot of the things that we'll be working on. And it's not going to be an overnight impact. We're going to have to keep working at it long before we're all done working on it.
No doubt, and the clock is ticking. Lorena, how about you? What are your issues, and what are your suggestions for addressing the low-value single-use plastic?
Though I see it in two ways. In one way, from the infrastructure perspective, I think that we have an opportunity to replicate the PET success. So how did we build the infrastructure, and how we had the right incentives to make the value of those plastics higher, go along the way, and how did we integrate a whole system around this, like the industry, the society, the government, and how in the case of Mexico was even something that was really key was how the Mexican government recognized the PET program, the first voluntary national plan for management of packaging waste. So I think that we could take this to these new plastics. And secondly, in the process perspective, I think that we need to switch some of the ways we are deciding inside the corporations how we are packaging things. Usually, it's the marketing guy, the one that is asking the R&D or the engineer how to design a product, and it should be all the way around. The engineers would be more empowered to say these are the materials that we should be using, and this is the kind of design, and you should use this how many times, and then take it to the marketing guy for him to find a way to sell it and make it sexy and attractive to the consumers, right? So I think that it's also, from the process perspective, we have opportunities.
Great, thank you, Lorena. So April, what is your take on this issue? Is there something circular capital can do to address that single-use, low-value plastic issue?
Yeah, Doug, I think the other panelists have covered it quite well. I would say it really is an innovation opportunity, both on the front end and end of life. So from an end of life perspective, that is an area. A lot of our investors have a focus already internally within their companies and in collaborative ways at looking at solutions for these types of materials that do not have the value of other plastics. And then also looking at it, as mentioned before, I think we're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs looking at what next generation delivery systems could look like. You have to think about this because this really is about giving an affordable package in many cases to people who need soap or whatever they're purchasing through these small packaged materials. So looking for ways to do that in refillable systems or alternative ways. I think we're seeing a lot of activity and interest in this space. So I'm optimistic that we'll start to see more solutions coming to bear on the challenge.
Great, thanks. And I'll finish up with you, Johan. Is there a perspective you would bring from the Dominican Republic or your work in the region on the low-value plastic?
Yes, I think there are no doubt we have plenty of opportunity to do better in DR and further develop the recycling industry in the country. We think that once we have the national network in place, many opportunity for development will continue to take place in the country, and always focusing on the valorization of the material.
Great, thanks. I began with you, Jenna, in these questions, and we only have about a minute or so left before wrapping up, so I'll finish one last question that came in for you here. What can we do once waste is out in the environment? Do you agree that the local level solutions need to include capturing plastic waste in drainage systems before they end up in the seas? How important do you think it is to promote interception and capture as part of the waste management solution?
I think that's potentially one thing we can do, but there's about 4 other steps before that. We tend to call this component last chance capture. So, as everyone has also mentioned, I think we have reduction where those of us have the luxury to do so, looking at product design, alternative materials, and then, of course, the infrastructure to manage waste that is generated. And then there's this last chance. The other thing I would add for this, so it's not necessarily where we need to focus everywhere, but collecting data from this component to inform all of those upstreams. Why is what we're seeing ending up here? What can we do about it? And so in that way, it can be a component to inform all those others, but you need the infrastructure to manage whatever you collect either way. So that's all an important piece.
Fantastic. Well, we are out of time now, so I'm going to have to wrap up this webinar and this moderated panel session, but I'd like to thank you, Jenna, John, April, Johan, and Lorena. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. We greatly appreciate the level of discourse and the opportunity and hope that you bring to this issue. So thank you so much for that. I'm also going to thank all the audience members who sent questions in or comments. As I said, we'll capture these and answer many of them offline later. Sorry couldn't get to all the questions, but again, that's only a short amount of time we had. The video from this event will also be available online on the USAID Urban Links website after the event. I'd like to also thank Senator Bob Menendez and Representative Michael McCall for their video messages, and Simon Loudon at PepsiCo for his as well. I'd particularly like to thank Michelle